You've probably been scrolling online and seen these photos of just incredible, ornate, old world buildings. And maybe the caption hinted that they weren't built by who we think they were. Well, if you have, you've stumbled upon a massive conspiracy theory, the lost empire of Tartaria. So today, we're going to dive in and see what this is all about. Right, you see these magnificent structures, like the Palace of Horticulture from 1915, and the craftsmanship. It just makes you stop and stare. Now, the official history is all there, but there's this online theory that's getting more and more popular, and it asks a pretty wild question. What if these incredible buildings weren't just temporary fair structures or fancy mansions from the Gilded Age, but were actually the last surviving relics of a forgotten global civilization? Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we need to break down what the theory actually claims. What was this Tartarian Empire supposed to be? At its core, the Tartarian Empire theory is this: the belief that there was once a single, massive, and super advanced civilization, called Tartary, that covered the entire globe. And somehow, its entire existence has been deliberately erased from our history books. And the claims here are just out of this world. We're not talking about something like the Roman Empire. No. Proponents of this theory believe this was a worldwide civilization that had figured out things like unlimited wireless energy, that it had achieved world peace, and then, poof, it was intentionally and systematically wiped from our collective memory. So with claims that big, you've got to ask, right? Where's the proof? Well, the evidence believers point to mostly comes down to how they interpret old buildings and photographs. Let's take a look. And of course, the first and most obvious question you have to ask about any supposedly lost empire is a big one. If it was so powerful, so advanced, where did it all go? Well, the theory's main explanation is pretty dramatic: a cataclysmic mud flood. And we're not talking about a few local floods here. The idea is that a single global event happened, where a sea of mud buried most of the empire's huge cities and almost everyone in them. This event basically reset civilization, wiping the slate clean so a new power structure could rise up and literally rewrite history. So beyond this mud flood, supporters point to clues they believe are hiding in plain sight. When they see buildings with windows and doors half buried below the sidewalk? To them, that's direct proof of the flood. They'll also argue that the very similar architectural styles you see all over the world, like all those ornate capitol domes or these huge star-shaped forts, couldn't possibly be a coincidence. To them, it points to a single, lost culture, and maybe a yearning for a past that was more beautiful than our present. They even use old photos with empty-looking streets as evidence and suggest that World War I and II were just a cover to destroy the last magnificent remnants of Tartarian architecture. All of this definitely paints a very dramatic picture, a secret history right under our feet. But here's the million-dollar question: is there any mention of a global Tartarian empire in the actual historical record? To answer that, we've got to put the modern theories aside for a second and look at actual historical maps and texts to see what Tartary really was. Let's start with the maps. Okay, so this is a map from the year 1700. And you can see it right there, clear as day: Great Tartary. But look a little closer. See how it's divided up? You've got Muscovite Tartary, Chinese Tartary, Independent Tartary. This wasn't one single unified empire. It was just a name that European mapmakers gave to a huge, and to them, pretty mysterious part of Asia. So here's the crucial takeaway. Historically speaking, Tartary was never a nation or an empire. It was a geographical term, sort of a catch-all name used by Westerners for that massive territory stretching from the Caspian Sea all the way to the Pacific Ocean, which was home to a whole bunch of different groups, including many semi-nomadic peoples. All right, let's just put these two ideas side by side to make it super clear. The theory claims a single advanced world empire. The historical record shows it was just a geographical name for a region. The theory imagines this super advanced civilization. The record describes various semi-nomadic groups. And while the whole theory depends on the idea that it was suppressed, the real Tartary is actually all over historical maps and accounts. Okay, so if the idea of a globe-spanning Tartarian empire isn't found in mainstream history, then where in the world did it come from? Well, the answer is surprisingly modern, and it actually starts in Russia. And this is a really key question, because these ideas didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They have a very specific and pretty recent origin story. So the modern version of this theory really started to take shape in the mid-1970s with a Russian academic named Anatoly Fomenko, who came up with this radical new chronology of history. Then, in the 2000s, it was popularized by Nikolai Levashov, who kind of wove it into his own strange occult writings. But it wasn't until around 2016 that the theory just exploded online, spreading all over the world and mostly leaving its original Russian context behind. And that original context is absolutely key to understanding this. Within Russian pseudoscience, the idea of Tartaria was deeply nationalistic. It was pitched as the real name for a greater Russia, whose amazing ancient history had been intentionally downplayed and ignored by evil Western powers. So this all brings us to how the theory is seen today by people who analyze its cultural impact. As it spread online, it's picked up a very contemporary and very telling nickname. Writing for Bloomberg, a journalist named Zach Mortis just nailed it. He called the Tartarian Empire theory the QAnon of architecture. And that comparison really hits home, doesn't it? Because just like QAnon, it offers this grand, all-encompassing alternative story that suggests some profound, hidden truth is being kept from all of us. So why do so many people find this idea so appealing? Well, analysts point to a few powerful reasons. It definitely taps into a real dissatisfaction with a lot of modern architecture, and this romantic idea that older, traditional styles were just inherently better. It's also perfectly made for social media and meme culture, where one striking picture can tell a whole story without needing any real context. And ultimately, for people who feel disconnected from or just don't trust the official version of history, it provides a sweeping, alternative story of the world. And all of this leaves us with one final fascinating question to think about. The theory of Tartaria might be about a lost past, but its popularity is very much a thing of the present. So, what does our modern fascination with a mythical, beautiful, harmonious lost golden age really tell us about how we feel about the world we're actually living in today?